So, another video. This will be an esoterically minded one. Those of you not interested in that subject, or who may be offended by it, if you're a Christian or whatever, it might not be for you. So, just to let you know, that's where we're going with this one. What has brought this video into... I want to talk first of all, I accidentally deleted the Jabberwocky video about the cure. Basically, the bottom line is that if you have been jabbed for whatever reason, it's your own business, I don't care, and you're worried about the manifestation of Mother Hydra's babies within you, the 7 people I know that have jabbed are perfectly healthy. In all, so far, thank God, in all 7 cases, they have regretted taking the jab, and they've admitted it to themselves. So it's almost like an epigenetic function kicks in, where it stops Mother Hydra's babies from hatching. It's a theory, but it's a good one, and maybe it's something you should think about for now. That if you have been jabbed, and it's your own business, I only mock the ones who slagged us off and tried to take our personal rights away. That there is a hope. There seems to be hope. The thing is to admit to yourself you did it. You made a mistake, and to actively work on this thing won't destroy me, and epigenetic changes in your brain might undo. Maybe it already started. The receptor genes that were involved in the Jabberwocky. Now, because that's the main, and I did some scat singing as well, you know, because when I'm stressed out, I turn into Mel Torme. So, scat rondo a la stressed. So, bit of an esoteric one this morning. This was inspired by some pictures that Tina had posted of Satanicon in the US, in the convention for Satanists, of the Levay Satanists, the Church of Satan types. And it was just like the pagan events in Ireland. They were all cosplay, you know, like to get them on, anything until you get them on their staffs and in their robes and bango bongo wanker and spirit fire spinning bitch. You had that, but it was more kind of like sexualized. But the funny thing was, nearly half these Satanists at Satanicon proved what cosplay lying fakes they all are, because they were wearing face masks, COVID face masks. So they were dressed up like devil and devilesses and the COVID mask on them. I just summed them all up. I thought the whole purpose of Shaitan was to be the negative of convention and society. And here you are, I am lust, I am decadence, I am indulgence, I am sin. But wear a face mask? That's literally what they're like. Fucking dickheads. Total phonies. So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the Satanists I knew when I was growing up. I had a very sort of healthy interest in Satanism. Now, I can see, like, the truthers, the fucking earwax flying out of their ears right now. Now what Satanism is, traditional Levay Satanism is a challenge to convention, to conformity, I was a born anti-conformist, to respectable, normal society that produces the likes of Alan Haw, and Alan Haw archetypes like I spoke about in the last video. And the whole concept is the inversion of this phony morality of Judeo-Christianity. So they have their own satanic, 10 commandments, satanic virtues they call them, and they make perfect sense when you read them. You can't say anything. It makes a hell of a lot more sense to turn your cheek and love thy neighbour. But the whole other thing is, like, they take the 7 deadly sins, except like murder, because that's taken. But things like, you must be if you want to be indulgent, be indulgent. If you want lust, you want lust. If you want decadence, you be decadent. This kind of thing. The things that are denied by the Abrahamic religions, you take them and you do them. But it comes from the root Proto-Arabic word shatan, which means the opposer. And Satanism just meant the opposer of the convention. So if you were in Nazi Germany and you were anti-Nazi, you would have been satanic. You were a shaitan. You were against the convention of the time. So there they all wearing, all these shaitans, Satanists, all wearing fucking face masks, COVID face masks, showed them what they really were. So I was thinking about, like, you know, when I was hanging out with some satanic people, Satanists, I was always a pagan. I've never changed. One time I tried atheism, but it just realised that was lunacy. But you couldn't deny the fact that there was some kind of intelligence to the universe. And yeah, it could be a mechanistic thing, but it's not. It's definitely divine. I've had too many strange experiences and, you know, paranormal and Fortean and other kind of magical experiences to prove that it's not just a mechanism. There's something else going on. There's definitely a higher intelligence that looks after the things. Christians call it God, Yahweh, Jesus. Hindus might call it Shiva or, you know, Vishnu, and it goes on and on. Okay, but it's real. It's real as far as I know it's real. So that's why, you know, it's better to believe in nothing and genuinely believe it than have a blind faith or be an atheist. Now, what I liked about the Satanists that I knew, apart from the fact that they were all nice people, was that they were, and they didn't wear, you know, they didn't dress up like devils or anything like that. They, you know, if you live next door to them working in the office, and you wouldn't know they were one. That they were against the concept of convention at the time, you know, like back in the late 80s, early 90s in New York. And I used to have great conversations with them. You know me, I'm an eager conversationist. After dinner, raconteur. I could probably make a living being a paid conversationalist. Like probably like one of these people you could pay to have. You'd pay me to come to dinner, and I would just like talk. I'd probably do well doing that. So as I was doing my early 20s raconteuring, we would have conversations about him. And we'd be talking about paganism, and I was saying, that's very interesting, but that was the Satanist. Oh yeah, kind of, that's, I can't have a problem with that. That's pretty cool. And we'd be talking about other things, and I'd be talking about like magic. You know, magic is central to. Well, there are lots of atheists lots of Satanists who are atheists. There's kind of a atheism, satanicness, but there's also an atheist who believe very much in magic. I mean, LaVey's Satanism is very much magic, and Michael Aquino's Temple of Set definitely believes in magic. In fact, I think I had more sort of like interest with Aquino's Temple of Set than I had with LaVey's satanic, you know, virtues and all that stuff. But there was still like a lot of interesting stuff there. We're talking about magic, and it was around the time. Well, it was not around the time. It was a good few years after. There were the Magical Child bookshop in Manhattan, and the Alchemist Head in Dublin had producing a lot of like selling a lot of fanzines from different sources, a lot of them from England, on the Chaos Magic thing, Phil Hine, and all the Golden Age of fanzine. And by the way, there's a chap called Mold in England gave me a phenomenal collection of Lovecraftian fanzines from the 80s. And I've only started getting to look at them now. So if you're watching this, Mold, thank you, my friend. Thank you, sir. They have been greatly appreciated. And I've only started really getting into them now. I had the time to do it with the sickness and everything. But so we've been having talks about this, that, and the other. And you know, the idea that anything could be a grimoire. Anything could be a grimoire. Anything could be a book of magical invocation. And, I mean, this is extremely blasphemous now, you know, but this was not done in a kind of like, you Christians are asshole. It wasn't done like that. It was done in this way. I'm talking about it now. And I said, well, you know, if you think of the Bible, and particularly the New Testament, if you were a true Satanist and you really believed in chaos magic, and you wanted to practice chaos Satanism, aside from inverting the 10 Commandments or whatever, all the kind of like non-vision, you know, the kind of like moralistic elements rather than you see, that's the whole point of Satanism. Instead of Christian or Judeo-Christian morals, they have human decency, and that always appealed to me much more. That was the main real thing that kind of appealed. It was human decency more than morals, and because morals are created by religions to follow, human decency is innate. You know, you're a good person. Now, and you show kindness and decency to others. But you don't let them, Satanism is very much into it, and you don't let them walk all over you. If they come into your domain or your lair and they insult you, you have the right to evict them or destroy them if they try to destroy you in your own home where Christianity you have the turn the other cheek thing and all the Sermon on the Mount. So I said, now this is if you're Christian, you're going to find this extremely blasphemous. And again, I'm not doing it as a mockery. I'm just saying it was just mulling and speculating. I said, I was only thinking about this last night after I seen Tina's pictures that she posted. And I'm thinking like, well, you could do the New Testament in reverse. Okay. So you could like, if you'd undo the Christian world by beginning with the resurrection and dying, then the next gate would be the crucifixion, the Last Supper, all through the Sermon on the Mount and all this kind of thing. You would actually have sex with Mary Magdalene. You wouldn't try to reform her. You'd try to have sex with her. And then this is kind of very much like a lot like the Gnostic Mass, but in reverse within Thelema. And then you finish with going to a manger and, symbolically I'm talking about. It'd be rites and rituals. You might do it with a doll or an effigy or even a crucifix, and then you transform it into a normal baby child at the end. And that way, you don't, instead of the Son of God being born, you just have a child being born into the world. And then all the crusades and all the other things that manifested out of Christianity would never happen. Likewise, you could do the same with Muhammad. To their virtue, Christians generally won't chop my head off for saying that, but Muslims would. That you could undo the Mohammedan. You could go back to Yemen and do a sort of like open the gate. Open the gates of Medina. That has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? So this is one of the reasons that I look at Islam and it frightens me, is that I could have these discussions about Satanism and the sort of like these blasphemous things when I was in New York or even in Ireland, even back in Ireland I was doing it, about what we consider blasphemous within the context of undoing it in a similar and I'm not the original one. The original idea came from, what was his name? Oliver St. John Grogarty, the friend of James Joyce, the famous Irish statesman and surgeon and whatever, and a guy who escaped this execution by swimming across the River Liffey in Dublin during the Civil War. The guy wanted to remove the curse of the Catholic Church and the impending growth of the likes of De Valera by introducing snakes into Ireland. This is his whole thing. He had it almost kind of like his own proto-chaos magic ritual of introducing snakes into Ireland to undo the sort of like the horrors of the Catholic Church and all this kind of the impending horrors that were happening at that time. Well, you think about it, he was kind of visionary because this is before we had like a lot of things like the Magdalen laundries and the industrial schools and all this kind of other horrors. The horrors of the Catholic Church in Ireland were subtle. If you, just a quick diversion here, if you've seen that movie In Brooklyn, it's about a middle class, Irish girl that goes to America and she falls in love with a nice Italian American lad. Now her story, she's not an impoverished Irish immigrant. She comes from a middle class Ireland in the 1940s, and there's a fella back in Ireland who is in love with her, and he wants to give her a life, and he has money and everything. She'd be very well off in Ireland. Now, she can't decide what to do. Now, she falls in love, she kind of falls in love with the Italian guy, but what really changes things for her is a Catholic priest in New York tells her she'd have no future in Ireland. Meanwhile, she's marrying a bricklayer or construction guy in New York, where she would have had a hell of a future in Ireland. But that was the insidious Catholic. Why did the priest say that? Wanted to increase Catholic diocese in America. Folklorist like a famine. They didn't give a shit about Ireland. The Catholic Church was delighted to see all these immigrants going to America and Britain and Australia, Canada, because they knew it would open Catholic dioceses in those countries. So they encouraged the diaspora. The famine was the best thing that ever happened to the Catholic Church in this country because it made them more international. There was a horrific price to pay for Bing Crosby's Going My Way. Now, so, that kind of thing. Now, I was thinking about, Islam. There's nothing good came out of Islam. Nothing has. You know, if there's one thing that, you know, and I'm not surprised that they're rapidly demanding, what you call it, censorship and not censorship, yeah, with them, but also heresy laws everywhere, like in Britain, because they're going for broke now. What has this, other than grooming gangs and floffles and kebabs, what has Islam produced? You know, this whole shit we were told when we were growing up, oh, the great, you know, Islamic universities of Cordoba in Iberia during the Caliphate, and how it was a tolerant society. My God, that's one of the greatest lies we were ever brought up with. It was a horrific society. The sultans had like, you know, harems with 10,000 Portuguese or Spanish girls held prisoner in them as sex slaves. Christian males were crucified for sport. And any kind of the greatness they inherited where it came from? The Berbers. You see, if you look into Islam, everything that they claim to be is their own, is inherited. It's stolen, or, you know, it's been seized from, or, you know, what's the word? Usurped from other things. So like the North African Arab Muslims, all that was Berber stuff. The Berbers were a pagan people before Islam, and we know so little about their ancient history because basically, well, the Muslims, when they take over, they destroy all the ancient history, so you can never find out. And so, like, with the Berbers, were building mounds and ancient megaliths and that was still, I think it was in Hocus Pocus book that I co-authored with Sarah Mondini, that there was I wrote about the Berbers and magic, and the Berbers still go, even in Islam, still go to the chambered mounds and stuff like that. They practice their own kind of magic, and well, they were the ones who went to Spain, but they didn't go as Berbers. They went as Muslims, as you know, as a caliphate, as the Moors, and they caused absolute hell in Iberia for, what was it, 800 years. Now they say, like, well, you know, you see all this bullshit on the internet. Islam gave us this, that, and that. No, it didn't. You got it either from the Persians, who are speaking of the world right now, the Persians, who were a noble pagan people, Zoroaster, and then Persian paganism before that. You had it from the Hindus, pagans, and the Greeks. They got it from the Greeks. So everything that we're told is great Islamic science came from the Berbers, the Europeans, the Romans, the Greeks, the Hindus, and the Persians, and they claim it as their own. They're not. They just took it. All the Indians, the great, you know, the Mongols went in and raided in India, but the Hindus had already developed tremendous scientists before that. In fact, there's a lot. If you want to see a country that's been destroyed by Abrahamism, it's India. First by the Muslims and then by the Christians. I mean, British writers going to India in the you know, the 1700s would write about how there wasn't a poor person in this country. It was much more advanced than Europe. Then you had the Dutch East India Company. This is the Hindu areas now, and they finished it off. So I mean, but you know, you risk your life by me making a video like this, just criticizing this religion. That's how dangerous they are, clear and present danger. Now, so you know, what these Abrahamic religions, not so much Christian, I'm very much into Christian mysticism, big time, and I do get that, and folk Christianity and folk Catholicism, and even, you know, the Church of England is quite mystical in its own way. You know, the original, this is why I think so many English people, Protestants and Americans, but especially in England, a lot of Protestant young people are compared to Catholicism, because the mystery, all these fucking, all these LGBTQ2 fruitcakes have taken over the Church of England. Who wants to go to an Anglican church where you have like a purple-haired freak lesbian vicar, a bishop, who's telling you that, you know, Islam is a true religion of England now? You know, why would you want to go to one of those sick places with these sick, disturbed perverts in them, with their rainbow flag robes and everything? No, they're all becoming Catholics. And because they're returning to what the Church of England originally was. The English mystical roots are definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, Catholic. England's, you know, gained an empire, but lost its magic when Henry VIII was justifying what he was doing with his Willie. And Anne Boleyn, remember, was a witch. And I have this other bizarre theory that Anne Boleyn was probably the reincarnation of Saint Joan, and she was getting revenge on the English for what they did to her in, during the wars hundreds of years earlier. So that's just my theory out there. Why do I have these theories? Because I'm not, the beauty of the way I live, not being a follower of convention, and you can have this if you're Christian, and not saying you can't. People like Patrick Pearse had it, Tolkien had it, is that you live in what I call a magical state. Now, a magical state is very different than like magical thinking, like in the psychological sense. A magical state is you don't see anything as ordinary, and you transform the environment. You magic, you sorcerize, you necromancize the environment around you into a magical place rather than. It's very similar to the hero's journey, the Campbell-esque Jungian hero's journey. Like, for instance, 20 years ago, me and a lady used to go for long walks in the countryside in Sligo. And nearly any day the weather was good, some like 10-mile walks a day. And we would walk up into the mountains through the forests. Both being Tolkien fans would have long discussions about Tolkien while walking through the countryside. And we would start describing places we would go. Like there was a village we'd go through and we called it Bree, because there was one pub in it, The Prancing Pony, we called the pub, and it wasn't called that. On the road there, we would name them after the old East Road, and other roads within Tolkien, we'd call a certain valley Valinor. And we had our own version of Fangorn Forest. And it was just be like, we started naming them, just not like believing they were those places. Like we say, we'll walk up this road past Fangorn, or we go into Valinor, or we go to Bree and the Prancing Pony today on the way back. And the amazing thing was, we had fairy experiences very quickly. There was strange experiences regarding little bags of soil. I think I've spoken about this to other times, around the roads that never made any sense. And another thing, we've experienced a fairy stray on several times. But the most amazing thing was we started to alter the environment. Because as we were walking through these places, for the first few weeks, whoa, you gigantic rat just ran across the road. I mean, the thing was that size. Now, you see what I'm talking about in myomancy? Why I'm talking, this is why you live in a magical state, folks. You actually change the reality. A gigantic rat ran from that wall to that wall while I was telling you this. You might see a moth fly in or something, or in the back window. I'm telling you. So what was happening was things got really, really weird. For starters, we had massive deer started appearing in the side of the road. Now, the deer would normally live way up on the top of the Ox Mountains, in very inaccessible areas, because lots of reasons. There's not only getting up there, but also there are huge bogs are difficult to walk on. And the summer and the spring are eaten alive by horseflies and midges and mosquitoes. And they started coming down. We were walking down. There was 2 gigantic deer. One day a farmer was leading some cattle, and he led past this bull that looked like something from Lord of the Rings. And then another day, there was all peacocks appeared in the field, and a German lady that was living there started keeping peacocks. It became magical. And this other guy had started to collect all different herds of rare and imported sheep with different colours of wool. And so it was like we were changing the environment into a literal Middle Earth by discussing it. And this kind of state that you get in, this magical state that you get into, what's the point of it? Well, it makes life tremendously more interesting. A walk down the country lane no longer becomes just a walk down the country lane. There's a story that was published it was a posthumous story, a Lovecraft story, called, what was it? Oh, shit. The Dark Brotherhood. And it's supposed to be basically based on a Lovecraft type character, and a lady walking through Portland at night talking about Edgar Allan Poe. And Edgar Allan Poe, in the form of an alien egregore, appears to them. Very great. It's an amazing story, actually. And takes him to another reality, another Sprague de Camp, I think, finished it posthumously for Lovecraft. The Dark Brotherhood, check it out. And it's It's really what I'm talking about. And he talking about Edgar Allan Poe, and Edgar Allan Poe, alien egregore appeared in front of him and started talking to him. And so it gives you tremendous intuition and insight and an almost seer-like quality. There's a reason why we read stuff like Tolkien and Lovecraft today and Robert Bloch, and we're like, my God, he's talking about now. When he's talking about how the political structure of Mordor is structured, he's really talking about the police state we're living in now. You know, this kind of thing. Like the way I use Lovecraftian allegories during the lockdowns, during the Rona Chronicles. And that's that magical state that is out, you know, like I said, you could be a Christian, a folk Catholic or a folk Anglican, and still have this state. It's not, and maybe the Berbers that are Muslims have it as well in North Africa, who still practice their pagan things inside Islam. You can have it in cities, like the Lovecraft story, The Dark Brotherhood, set in Providence, and then walking through the nocturnal city at night. Psychogeography has a lot to do, and ontology is very much rooted in that. And then you're able to see the future. This is why I have things like the psychic weather, and I've worked at Renfielding and all this stuff. And like, it's astonishing when you read, like, what people say. How did you have a chapter in 2011 in a book talking about the new normal? They will bring in the new normal at some point, and there was all the politicians saying the new normal during Rona. And also, how did you write on the introduction to Walpurgis Night that the events that took place in 1933 would not be repeated again to 2020 in terms of the catastrophic changes to humanity? How did you know that? And I go, I didn't know it. It was just something kind of told me. How did I know in 2019? Why are there videos like Your Witch King Never Lied to You and other videos about why was I making videos right before the lockdown was declared on the Committee on Public Safety in France during the French Revolution, and Robespierre and all these other individuals involved in it? And I was saying in the videos, I'm making these videos because I kind of feel like that something is coming. And then, you know, a month or 2 months later, what do we get? The Rona, the lockdowns. That's because of this magical state that I had put myself into. Some part of your consciousness transfers outside space-time, and nothing is ever normal. Like I'll tell, like, you know, less blasphemous thing. I can look at the New Testament and see it in a whole different way. Okay, for instance, look at the element of tables in that story. Jesus Christ is an architect, a carpenter. He builds tables. Okay, he turns over the table in the temple. You know, this was like the end of the old version of Judaism, and him saying a new version of Judaism has begun. It's more symbolic. There was the table at the Last Supper, where the famous painting, that's a very mystical and, you know, a very symbolist painting, not symbolist, but symbolic painting, esoteric painting by Leonardo da Vinci in Milan of the Last Supper. The way they're all lined out in a row like that. Very esoteric, of him and the apostles, the 13 of them. Now, with the 3 gates behind them. So, you know, there's, you know, you could see a mysticism in that, you know, definitely. And the form tables, here's another one, tables, right? You know, and anyone ever asked me from the time I was young, describe it magic, and I said, well, magic in its basic sense is, you imagine something in your brain, and then you bring it into reality. That's all it is. So you could be a carpenter seeing a table in your mind's eye. I always said table in your mind's eye, and you draw it down on a piece of paper, carpenter again, and you made it. And I definitely know I didn't come up with that, because I've heard other people describe magic that way, and they always say table. And now you have there's something esoteric about the table. You go right back to Plato. No, you have Plato, the table, the altar, the Magi's altar, and like in the tarot card, the magician, right? The 4 implements representing the 4 elements of the universe, material elements of the universe, and the the 4 stages of man, the 4 seasons, all that kind of thing. And there's 4 Gospels, and there's 4 books of Islam. You know, it just never ends. And Plato, in his notion of forms, Plato had this theory of forms that nothing in the material, and his quantum physics kind of does suggest this, nothing in the material world is not real. It's just purely an imagination. And where they really exist is in your conscious mind, your imagination, as what Plato called forms. And Plato used the example of a table, that a table doesn't exist there. The table is a form in your brain. You're looking at a vision of the table. It only exists in your mind. And we know that from the observer effect and everything. That was 3,300 years ago by Plato, whatever it was, 3,000 or 2,800 years ago. And then you have the table, like the not only the table in the Last Supper, but you have the round table, and I'm sure you guys in the comments will come up with other ones, of the King Arthur and the knights, you know, the round table of King Arthur. And the table is often where deals are made, art is created. It's the kind of the altar that we built. And Table Mountains, Ben Bulben right here. There's very few Table Mountains in the world, and they're all associated with magic or mysticism or legend. Ben Bulben, but even the Table Mountain in South Africa, that has there was all kinds of legends revolving the devil and stuff that the Dutch brought there around. And then there's Ayers Rock, whatever its current name is, in Australia, the Table Mountain. You know, there's something about that. There's something about a Table Mountain. You know, where does the word table come from? I think it comes from tabla, which is a Latin word that went through English to table, and tableau, that's where it comes from. Tableau and table in French, and the two of them give us the modern word of table. And they mean two things. I think they mean a table, as in a place to serve food, and a table to work on, and also an altar. And tablets. You have the tablets of 10 Commandments. We're on a tablet. Because table and tablet come from the same Latin root. Because you would write your tablet on a table. And the tablets in the iPads and, that kind of thing, the Samsungs and stuff, those kind of tablets. So table has, table and bridges too. I had a really amazing dream about a bridge this morning. Tables have this quality that lends themselves to esoteric thought and to mysticism, because they're the altar. That's basically why the tablet. So this is even the way that this flight of fancy I went on. Now people say to me, "How do you have these kinds of things?" Because I'm in a magical state constantly, and therefore my mind has these sort of Joycean streams of consciousness. That's why I believe that James Joyce in Bloomsday the other day was a magi, because he could go on. You read Ulysses, and it's nothing but a complete, stream of consciousness of Leopold Bloom's mind during the day, and it's mind blowing because it's people say I don't understand. I understood it because it's exactly how my mind works. So we know he was a Jesuit and stuff, and he was also Oliver Grant, John Grogerty's friend. So it all inside the round tower, inside just never ends. So listen, that's just an esoteric musing based on the magical state and why it's important to live that kind of lifestyle, because it actually makes you smarter. It makes you more intuitive. And it's when myself and Sarah wrote the Hocus Focus book, we write throughout the book, it was our interest in the paranormal, my interest in cosmic horror, her interest in ghosts and everything else, that furnished us with the equipment to see the Rona scam for what it was. Because I was looking at that and saying, Quatermass. I was looking at Nigel Neal, I was looking at that and saying, we know what this is. This is the unfoldment of the grimoire, the Book of Shadows, written by the likes of Nigel Neal and John Wyndham and the other cosmic horror and Lovecraft, scientific romances. and the dystopian side. It's coming true. The grimoire of Neil Wyndham and Lovecraft is coming to pass. And that's why you should need to live in these states and not see anything as ordinary. So I didn't mean to be blasphemous or hurt people's feelings. When I spoke about the satanic mass relating to the New Testament, I was just giving an example of how it might work. And so enjoy the nice weather and go for a walk in the country. And when you're walking through those fields over there, say, and there's another one we talk about quickly before I go. Within Tolkien's work, there's lots of stories of, there was mutterings around, mutterings in the prancing prone. You have strange necromancers and strange strangers and strange coming and doings in the woods around Buckland. That's the exact same thing as people saying in America, up in those woods there is Sasquatch. We're like that. That's what you live like that, your world will become like that. And that's how I knew about the Rona and other things, because you thought the people of Middle Earth could feel whether it was Sauron or Saruman, or even the possible return from the wizards who've been cast to the east. A new power is rising, and that's what the psychic weather is. You can feel a new power rising. Sanguine noises. Love yous all. You gorgeous fucking bastards. Have a lovely weekend.